Good morning, everybody. It is 10 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I have resumed recording on this training for this morning. So I first want to welcome you to joining us for our first content provider training. This will be session 1. My name is Melissa Salima, and I am a member of the InfoHio instructional team. Today is the first session of 2 sessions that will train content providers who work or represent organizations and agencies who have educational content that they would like to contribute for educators to find and use as part of the curriculum using InfoHio's open space. So I've mentioned a little bit before, but if you're just now joining us, Mary has been diligently putting the link in that's associated with today's presentation so that you have that to take with you. As well as on this first slide, you'll see a red link for training links. There's a separate document that associates all the links that I'll refer to throughout today's presentation. And just a quick bit of info on Zoom. So as people join, that link is not available to those that had not joined the meeting yet. So if you see that in there, just know that we're just trying to make sure everybody has that information. So today's training will be recorded and it will be made available. I'll share that with you a little bit later too. Everyone's been placed on mute for the first part of the training. During the training though, if you have some questions, please use that chat to ask questions, and then I will periodically pause to address questions throughout the training. However, there will be some dedicated time at the end for any remaining questions. So at that time, you'll be able to unmute and we can have a little Q&A. So let's talk just a moment about content providers. Who are content providers? Content providers are organizations or agencies who contribute educational content that your organization has developed and would like to contribute to open space. And why would organizations want to contribute that content? Well, first, it's a way to increase exposure for your organization for the educational content so that a teacher, kind of like this one in the picture, can have another avenue to access that content in a different way. Your organization still will retain the ownership of the content that you're contributing. It's still going to live on your organization's website, and that's where open space will point educators when they find your item. So what we're going to do today doesn't require your organization or agency to be set up as a content provider in open space at this time. However, if you want to set up your organization as a content provider in open space, I'm going to share more about that towards the end of today's session. It's going to give you some additional options for adding content later, especially if you have a lot of content that you would like to bulk upload. It will also make it easier for users to find all of the content that you've contributed as well. So today's focus is going to be helping you understand the process of adding content for an individual item. That's going to help you plan and prepare for adding multiple items. We're going to touch on several aspects of open space that are related to you as a content provider. So you may already have some familiarity with open space. However, if you're not familiar and you want to have a little greater understanding, there's a short video that goes over how an educator might use open space to curate, to create, or to collaborate. So if you're interested in seeing a little bit more from the teacher perspective, I suggest watching this video, sharing this video with those that you might be working with. So as I mentioned for this first session, we're going to focus on adding an item to open space. So there's a couple ways to get to open space. One is to go to the InfoHio homepage and select the menu in the top right, and you'll see open space in the menu. And then when we're at open space, we're going to focus on creating an account, adding individual items from your organization's website. And the key thing is going to be applying the metadata to make sure that it's easy for educators to find those items. You can also visit OpenSpace directly at openspace.infohio.org. And this is going to be the face of Ohio's platform for pre-K-12 curriculum creation and collaboration, where you can create content to open space so that educators can find it easily. And then educators can also contribute their own content or collaborate with others here too. So we're going to take a quick tour of the homepage and a couple getting started tips. So although it's not necessary for contributing content as far as we're concerned today, there is a group feature that allows educators to collaborate and create with other educators. You can kind of think of groups as another way for educators to pull in content, like the content provided from your organization that has been published in open space. They can use it for discussion and use it when creating content to develop it into a unit, for example. Then under Discover, an option for providers appears here. Clicking on that is going to provide an alphabetical list of content providers. Those are going to be organizations that have been set up specifically as content providers. So a little more on that later. And then we're going to be talking about metadata quite a bit because this is really going to be a big piece to the puzzle. Selecting the metadata will be essential to helping those educators search for the content so that other educators can find it and find the previously published content. So you can use a keyword search, you can use the subject, the education level, the standard drop-down menu. All of those things are going to help educators find content. We're not going to be further exploring all of these areas right now during the training. However, it might be beneficial just to kind of poke around on the website and see what you can find by using some of these fields. Two areas that we're going to focus on today are going to be creating an account. And it's important to have an account, unlike how you don't have to have an individual account to use the InfoHio digital content resources. You'll be individually contributing content on behalf of your organization. And so having an account is necessary as part of the step. And then you'll want to be able to add content as an open educational resource that others can search and use from using this Add OER button. So just a brief look at the registration page. When creating your individual account, you're going to be sure to use your institution or organization email so that we can confirm your affiliation during the registration process. Although you can submit content using an individual account, it's important to note that when you're submitting content on behalf of your organization, you're going to be able to add the appropriate author when submitting a resource. Okay, so now to add the content. From the orange Add OER button, two options are going to appear. The first on the left is Open Author. It allows users to build within the platform itself to create a standalone learning module, a lesson, an assignment, an assessment, or an activity. The second option is to submit a resource from the web, and this is the option that we're going to use for today's session. As a content provider, you have the content that is ready and available to be added from a different location like your organization's website. So here's an example of what a finished product looks like once a link, resource details, and metadata are placed together as an item in OpenSpace. Over the next few minutes, I'm going to talk to you more about the process for adding content using a link and choosing the information that's represented on the resource page that gets published in OpenSpace. View Resource is the button that will take users directly to the link associated with the content that you submit from your organization's website. The item title appears at the top, followed by the description. And this whole section here represents the author, the metadata, and the attribution for the item. Then to the right, standards alignment can be applied, and this is where it will appear. And then beneath, under tags, this is what's going to help a user locate content with the same tag. So we'll talk more about those in depth. And something else to notice here is that everything that appears in teal on this page is a hyperlink that connects other items in OpenSpace together. Things that have used the same metadata that end up getting represented in things like tags, or if the same has the same author. So the terms provider and provider set are areas that can appear after an established content provider adds content. We're going to cover more about that in the second training, and I'll mention a little bit more about it at the end when we talk about establishing your organization as a content provider. So for now, let's focus on what information you'll need to submit for a single item. For the purpose of our training today, you're acting as a content provider using your individual account associated with your organization. So please only submit content that your organization owns or has been given permission for distribution. We're going to walk through this process step by step, and I've also provided a link on this slide and in that training links document that will kind of just give you a real quick snapshot of the steps. So there's 3 steps to adding a single resource. The first is to provide the URL. The second is to assign the metadata. And the third is to submit for approval. You'll want to copy and paste the complete URL for the content available from your organization. Submit from web is for content that lives on your organization's website. In this example, I work for the Ohio History Connection, and I'm submitting an item that can be found on the Ohio History Connection website. The biggest question to ask yourself is about access. So when you provide a link to be contributed to content from your organization's website, think about, if I give this link to someone, can they see the content without a password? So some things to think about when you're using the URL is making sure it's complete, that it will complete the path. It's open and it's freely available, that it's unrestricted, meaning that it doesn't have any requirements to accessing an account to be able to view it. And then if you find that you have some content, we have lots of different types of content providers that have joined us today. So if you're sharing something that's been stored in, say, a cloud platform like Google Drive, you want to make sure the link is set there so that anyone can view it with that link on the web. And keep in mind, if you are sharing things from a cloud platform like Google Drive, that any changes that are made to that document will be represented, just like if you had shared that link with someone else in an email. That includes the sharing permissions to that link, that includes any of the content stored on that document. So step 2 is to name and describe the resource, provide the attribution, and apply the metadata. So based on the URL that you entered in the first step, the title will auto-generate for you. Since that title is automatically generated, it may not always be correct. So this is a good place to pause and double check to make sure that it represents the title the way you'd like it to. For the description, try looking at an existing description that might exist with that item that's available where it lives on the web. So in this section, we're going to spend a couple minutes here because while it seems short, there's a lot to understand in this section. Consistency is really going to be the name of the game when you're adding content, particularly when you're adding lots of content. If the content or the document itself does not have an individual author associated with it, you can list your organization or whoever the copyright owner is. And if you have several people working on adding content from the same organization, say you're working as a team, make sure you're on the same page with the information being entered. So for example, if your organization uses an abbreviation or an acronym for short, teachers may not recognize your name right away. So this is important because once an author has been introduced on an item and you've started to add content this way, as you see where Ohio History Connection has been added, it's going to try to remember that and replicate and populate that for you in the future. So for some of you, there might even be content that you have that someone else has contributed to your organization. Perhaps a teacher has created a lesson that your organization has permission to display and use. So you can add multiple authors here as well. Each field will accept multiple authors or multiple items. So next, you're going to decide on the conditions of use. And you'll see that it's asking you to select Creative Commons license for this resource. Here's where you're going to see all of those options related to Creative Commons licensing. If you click on any one of those buttons displayed on my screen right now, they're going to give you a description and a way to view more information on the usage rights. There's also a link associated with this slide that provides all that information in one place. Generally speaking, though, if the item you are adding does not have any of these conditions listed on the document itself, you're going to select I don't see any of these. A few of you might be in a situation where you have some cases where you have something that you're adding that's marked as copyright. And we can help update that item with the information so it appears with that particular license. In OpenSpace, initially, on the front end, you're able to just see what's available for Creative Commons. So if something is specifically marked as copyright, we'll talk about how to submit that once it's been published to let us know you want us to make that change for you. Then the last step in this subsection is to mark that you've reviewed the minimum requirements checklist and the OpenSpace rubric that you believe your OER object meets those minimum requirements. So just a little bit of information about that, and I have provided the link to the rubric so that you know it's there. As content providers, we understand that the content you're submitting, generally speaking, it meets the minimum requirements. So I'm sharing this with you to provide more of an awareness about the information, the expectations of what content can be found in open space. But these are the areas of that rubric that a member of our team will review before publishing your item. Now, this is a bird's eye view of the metadata fields in step 2. And I mentioned this is going to be a really critical piece. Consistency is going to apply to this section as well. There's pieces here that will drive users to your content, just like we saw on the homepage of OpenSpace, where educators can do an open search. They can use some of the drop-down menus there as well to search within specific fields. So as you make your way through each field, you're going to notice that some have asterisks: subject area, material type, media format. All of those are required pieces of metadata. However, providing the metadata to each field, if it's available, is going to always produce better results. More information about your content is going to give educators more angles to be able to search for it to find it. So we talked about consistency being key, but there's some strategy at play here too. Applying the metadata that represents your content and using the mindset of an educator searching for it is what can provide the best use of exposure for each piece of content. And that's really what we're all about, is supporting you through the process to be able to add your content in and give your organization more exposure to content that you wish to share. So now if we take a closer look at each of these areas from the bird's eye view, the primary user and the educational user refer to the person who is the main user of the content and how it can be used in the classroom. So you'll notice in subject areas, there are 2 selected here. You have the option to select more than 1 in each field, depending on how it pertains to that content you're contributing. Then under media formats, you have a number of choices as well. There is a help article associated with this slide that will summarize the descriptions for a couple areas that are in a little more detail, that maybe need a little bit of a key to help understand which selection to choose. So that's going to include subject area, material type, and education level. Those might prove helpful as you start thinking about how to plan when you contribute content. Then a little bit more about educational standards. So something to keep in mind is that not everything is going to fall into a standards alignment category, or you may not consider yourself an expert when it comes to standards alignment with your content, and that's okay. So while this is a searchable field for educators to locate content, it's not a required field. For items that you do wish to standards align, you'll start by selecting a set of Ohio Learning Standards, what you see here on the screen. And then you will select a grade level, a grade band, followed by a learning domain, and then finally the alignment tag, or also known as the indicator. So if you want to take a look at the Ohio Learning Standards as a whole, the Ohio Department of Education has a website of all of these learning standards, and that link's been provided here as well. So as you make your way through the last few fields, the final thing is adding tags. This is an area where you can kind of be creative, but apply that consistency. Tags are unique to the content and are a valuable way to connect multiple pieces of content by using the same tag for similar items. So just how a hashtag would work, tags work very similarly here within OpenSpace. You want to think really about what educators are going to be thinking about, what they're going to be searching for to help you determine those tags. And for an example, an educator might be looking for something in STEM or financial literacy, maybe a primary source like a photograph. This is a good one to brainstorm within your organization as you look at all of the content that you plan to contribute. So the final step in submitting an item to OpenSpace is to preview the information that you've entered, make any corrections, some adjustments, and then submit the resource. So you'll have a chance to modify the cover image here too, if you like. That's really all there is to it. Your item will be reviewed by a member of our team, and then you'll receive a confirmation email once the item has been published. So if there are any questions or suggestions about the item, you'll receive a follow-up email from us, and you'll still be able to resubmit the item. Once your item is published, that's when you can return back to the OpenSpace page and use all that metadata you entered in order to try and find your item, just like a teacher would. We're going to go back to our published item that we looked at earlier, and look at a couple different areas of this now from a different angle. Once an item is published, educators can then interact with this item through different options. One option that they have is to save it within OpenSpace. So since this is pointing out to a website, they wouldn't be able just to download it from there. Instead, we have them save it within OpenSpace. So if they're a member of a group, they can save it within a folder. There's also folders that are just specifically for the user as My Items, and they'll have the option to save it there or create a new folder. It can also be shared directly with students. So if it's an item that an educator wants to push directly to Google Classroom, for instance, they can use that Classroom button or grab the URL at the top that's unique to that item if they are not using Google Classroom. Educators can also share this resource as a social presence. OpenSpace has available Twitter, WhatsApp, and Pinterest. Under the image preview, you can see how many views, saves, and comments are associated with each item. And then don't forget that these tags down here are the ones that are going to come in handy to find that same content tag the same way. So now we're going to kind of circle back to something I mentioned near the beginning about being a content provider, and how right now in our training today, we're talking about you contributing content from your individual account as a representative of your organization. Within this section, the words content provider appear with different headings that have been contributed. So a content provider has the ability to list their organization as a provider and then mark sets of content as a specific set. You'll see it listed as provider and provider set. So in this example, the provider included the content in a provider set and included the author of the resource to provide attribution. So in this case, perhaps there was someone who actually authored it, provided it to this content provider, and they wanted to provide attribution, but still be able to say this is part of the content that we have in our collection. The training for today was really focused on adding single items from that individual OpenSpace account. We've talked through all the pieces and parts, so now we're going to look at some next steps, now that you understand kind of the nuts and bolts of contributing to OpenSpace. So now let's start thinking the bigger picture here, planning for the platform. You know, all the pieces and parts that it takes to contribute an item. So we talked about consistency, using the same organization name, determining what that's going to be, creating tags that are going to help connect your content together. And then some things to get your content ready is going to be thinking about the consistency of uniform metadata, especially if you have a lot of items that are similar in context. And then grouping that like content together and prioritizing it. So if some of you have dozens of items versus hundreds of items, your approach as far as the timing of how much content you want to put in at one time will be important to the timeline. We do have a question in the chat I'll go ahead and grab here, being asked, can parents access it? OpenSpace was built for educators. So a lot of the things that we offer through InfoHio are intended for the full pre-K-12 audience, so for students, teachers, and parents. OpenSpace is specifically for educators to be able to curate and create content in there and then be able to push it out to students as part of their curriculum or supplemental curriculum. So a couple things that you might be interested in if you just kind of want to take a deep dive in understanding OpenSpace through the educator's eyes a little bit more, the approach that an educator might take. You can check out, there's 2 classes that we offer in our professional development section, InfoHio Campus. All of our classes are open, they're available 24/7, there's no registration required. Or if you're interested in providing training to districts, if that's something that's going to be of interest to you, using OpenSpace, you're welcome to use these classes, adapt the content within them, and use it as part of your agency PD offerings. There's an OpenSpace Basics class that ties together some of the introductory steps that were included in today's training. So you can also use those for support. And there are lessons in there that support how educators can begin using OpenSpace. The open space collaboration creation class, you'll notice that one's rated at 3 hours, the basics class rated at 1, so a lot more depth in the second class. There are 2 sections that will probably be most important to you there. You'll notice if you get into our classes through those links, they're all set up very similarly. The copyright and licensing area and the creating and contributing content sections will probably be the most valuable in that particular class. So this method of adding individual items, it works fine if you're just got a handful of items. It's something we encourage educators to be able to do on their own as well. But in many cases, you're probably saying to yourself, I have lots of items. And now that you've seen all the information and the metadata that goes into the final product, we're going to kind of revisit that plan and that strategy here as we wrap up, and then I'll take some questions. So we talked about making a plan. So a couple slides back, we talked about the things that are going to help you kind of develop that strategy or plan as an organization, as a team, and to determine all of those things for consistency. And then the second thing is we'd encourage you to go ahead and submit an item or two the way I showed you today through an individual item, just to kind of get your feet wet, try it out, work the process, and be able to see what a published item looks like with your content. So between now and the next training that's going to be held same time on Friday, November 13th, we'd encourage you to send us a request to become a content provider so that you're ready to go after the next training. So this slide's going to be important for those next steps. There's a way to contact us for support at support.info.ohio.org. There'll be a couple drop downs there. The one you're looking for is databases and websites, and then there'll be a selection for open space. And all you're going to do is let us know your organization and that you're interested in becoming a content provider, and we'll help take it from there. If you also have someone who wasn't able to join today's training, I mentioned that this is being recorded. And so for anyone who may have missed today's training, we'd love it if you would share this recording that will be made available to them. I've included that link associated with this slide. And then the last thing I want to revisit is talking about any changes that you need to make to a published item. So let's say you did have something that's copyrighted and you couldn't select that on the attribution area. Once an item is published in OpenSpace, you can locate your item in OpenSpace, grab the URL associated with that item, and submit a support ticket, just like the directions above on this slide, and be able to tell us exactly what needs to be changed. Or if you've decided to add standards alignment to it, or you noticed a mistake, you can reach out to us and we can certainly make those changes for you. So with that, I'm going to pause my remarks for now. I don't see any other outstanding questions in the chat.
Melissa, this is Erica. We did have a question, and that was, is there a cost to use OpenSpace? And there is not. InfoOhio has licensed the OpenSpace platform for all Ohio educators and education agencies to freely use. So there is no cost to our Ohio content providers to create an account or create groups or to contribute content.
If there are other questions that you would like to unmute yourself, you are welcome to do that at this time. We can have a little dialogue on that.
Melissa, this is Lori.
Yes.
Could you reiterate how they can receive the recording?
Sure. So I'll actually back out of my screen here a little bit and show you. So if you visited from this presentation, the training links page, you're going to find on slide 22 the link associated with it. It's going to take you over to this information page about open space on our website. And then down here is where you're seeing today's session, the information and the link for today's training. We'll be posting that recording here for access a little bit later. I'm not hearing or seeing any more questions. I do just want to reiterate how happy we are to have all of you here today. We appreciate your interest. We hope to hear from you, letting us know that you're interested in getting your organization signed up as a content provider. And I hope that we'll be able to see all of you again at our next training on November 13th at 10 a.m. I'm going to hang on here for a few more minutes to see if there are any other questions that come in. Otherwise, you can go ahead and exit the meeting when you're ready. Thank you, everyone.